Yes. Hello. Oh, okay, great. So, hi everybody. My name is Darko Petrovic. I have two hats. One of them is usually with, yeah, well, not now, obviously. um, I have usually I'm working with the World Food Program. It's the United Nations organization fighting hunger in the world. And the other hat is actually being a game studies student as part of the certificate program in Krems, which I enjoyed. Actually, I enjoyed both roles until recently. Now both are on hold. I'm a father of a little baby that I'm trying to raise into a good baby gamer, whatever it's going to be. So my talk today will be about games beyond entertainment and how games and play can actually help in the fight against world hunger. How can we outplay hunger, so to say? That's his thing. Okay, so yeah, it's basically about a case study about the World Food Program. I will also mention a few things that other organizations are doing. In case you're not familiar, UNWFP is the world's actually largest humanitarian organization that is fighting hunger. It has operations in about 120 countries around the world, with its main focus being, saving lives in emergencies, relief interventions, humanitarian relief when there is a war, when there is a natural disaster, etc. And for its work, for its efforts to combat world hunger, it actually received the Nobel Peace Prize. Since we're now in a Nobel week, WFP actually was a laureate in 2020, because fighting hunger also means creating conditions for peace. You reduce pressure from people in very difficult settings to, cope in very destructive ways, also to engage into conflict for over resources. So that's briefly about the World Food Program. Um, yeah, I mentioned one of its key areas of work is saving lives in emergencies, but also they do changing lives. So this is more like the development side of humanitarian work, wherever they are in whichever setting, in whichever kind of protracted or fragile setting. It also makes sense to pave the way for people to transition from a situation of aid dependency to self reliance and to jobs, to food security, right? But on their own terms. And so there are a lot of projects which actually promote this, from ecosystem restoration in the Sahel. We also have school meals programs where the school meals which are offered in those countries not only incentivize students to go to school and to learn, but also to acquire knowledge because they don't get hungry. We all know that it's not easy to learn on an empty stomach, right? So that food actually helps to increase attendance, increase retention, increase learning, but also linking those programs to the local farming setting. So actually purchasing food from local farmers, helping them establish themselves better in the food system, and linking that food system to the school to actually have a much higher multiplier effect. So I'm just highlighting two kind of activities on this development side. And then the third also priority is enabling others in the humanitarian space to do their work effectively. So WFP also is managing the humanitarian airline called UNHAS, with dozens of planes in several countries around the world where access is very difficult, where you have to bring humanitarian workers, but also some cargo to remote areas where commercial airlines are not doing that. WFP is also managing a fleet of vessels, container ships, and vessels which bring food to under-resourced regions, and thousands of trucks and jeeps and whatever you can think of, autonomous vehicles and drones now, and donkeys and elephants, depending on the context, to bring food when there's an emergency. So it's a service provider that is enabling last mile work for also other organizations. It's a critical lifeline, basically, to many people. Um, yeah, and WFP also has a gaming journey that is ongoing, that is not has not finished. So just a little bit more context here. WFP is a fully voluntarily funded organization, so it does not get any money regularly from the UN budget, as some other specialized agencies do. It has to raise 100% of its funding every year anew. Maybe let me just go back here before we get too deconcentrated. And so it's important to raise this money every year anew. 96% of the funding is coming from the public sector, from governments. 2/3 of this from G7 countries, in fact. And so now all of these countries are in retreat. You may have heard through the media, the United States has cut a lot. So, countries are struggling, organizations are struggling to maintain the same level of services, but they're not alone. I mean, also other countries like Germany, UK, Nordic countries, Austria, humanitarian aid or development aid in general is in retreat. And so this is a problem for service delivery, for providing aid in countries where this is absolutely needed. And so there is a need to diversify those resources. So there's also work with the private sector, both in terms of fundraising, but also in terms of benefiting from the skills and technologies that the private sector brings to actually do the work better, to do assistance better, more efficiently, more effectively, with more impact, with more return on that investment, right? So gaming is also part of that equation. And it has been since at least 2005. This is what I could find out based on available information, publicly available information. WFP, for example, has a private sector partnerships division working with different companies from different verticals, logistics, pharma, food, fashion, all kinds of stuff, sports as well. And so gaming has been a sector that there was engagement since 2005, initially for educational purposes. So I will just highlight, I will not go over all of these, about 20 examples, but since 2005, at least 2,000 points of engagement have existed. And the first one was actually Food Force, which you can see on the very left, which is a game that was produced on CD-ROM for PC use, which was about educating middle and high school students on what supply chains are like. Putting yourself in the shoes of a humanitarian who has to deliver food assistance to a zone that was struck by a disaster, by a conflict, putting you in a situation where you have to take decisions. What kind of food do I provide? What is the calorie value of that food? It also has to be nutritious, of course, not just empty calories. And so teaching them the complexity of that supply chain and of that challenge of delivering and the time pressure behind, because it's about life saving is not you just let things go easily, but you have to rush. There is a time element involved, and so that was shipped of CD-ROMs around the world through schools. Many have appreciated this. And I hear from time to time from people who actually have played this. Yeah, I know. I remember 20 years ago, I actually used this in my class. So it's really nice to hear those stories. Another example that was actually the first fundraising example for WFP through gaming was Free Rice, which you can see below, which was actually a game developed by a teacher who wanted to help its child prepare better for exams in different subjects. It's a trivia game. And then that teacher has actually donated that game to WFP, which is now a WFP IP. It still exists. It's still in operation. It has grown. It has its own path of evolution. It was also an app at some point. It had some also adverts. But now it's basically a browser-based trivia game that is still in use by 3 million users or players around the world every year. And it's basically about, teaching through a very light trivia approach, English or certain subjects, about SDGs in a quiz setting, a very light quiz setting that you can use even for employee engagement. So some companies like the Citibank or Deloitte have reached out to actually use this game for their own kind of social impact or social CSR activities. So, and it has also been raising money. So depending on the year, there have been co-sponsors. So when you play this game, you unlock certain, rice grains, and those rice grains get donated to a certain program, like for example, school meals. So we're always looking for co-sponsors on that. Another one I would like to highlight, Zynga. This is a very interesting pioneering activity around their portfolio of games, including Farmville. Back in 2010, that was very up and coming social media game, which was integrated into Facebook, which was at the time the new thing to be using games in. And WFP actually was able to raise 1.5 million US dollars within 2 weeks of gameplay using in-game purchases back in 2010 for the Haiti earthquake. So all that money went for relief for that operation. And so basically we curated a few virtual assets like white rice grains that players could purchase, and that money then went for as an in-game purchase for WFP for the response. And that model actually has grown. It has become a standard model for fundraising these days in the gaming industry. So it has been used very successfully all the way up to 2022 with Epic Games and Xbox. So I'm highlighting them here because this was, of course, the year where the war in Ukraine went completely out of control, right, with the invasion of Russia. And so what Epic Games and Xbox did, also with many other gaming companies, they have donated a lot of money to this cause. But in Epic Games' case, it was through the Fortnite Battleground game, where for 2 weeks of gameplay, all the proceeds were donated to the Ukraine relief efforts, benefiting, I think, at least 6 different organizations. WFP was one of them. And there were also other organizations, other game companies like Embracer from Sweden, Supercell from Finland, itch.io. There was also a Humble Bundle developed. So like the whole gaming community came around and either donated directly or through their players almost $200 million within, I think, 2 or 3 months for the Ukraine relief, which was mind-blowing for everyone. Of course, it's not something will happen every year, right? It's quite an outlier in terms of fundraising, but it just shows you what potential is out there to support social objectives, relief, and etc. And here, just to finish this off, 92% of that funding actually was player mobilized by players through in-game purchases. So these were not just like direct donations by the companies, but it was really an indirect donation by the company where the funding came from the players themselves. And so there are many other examples. I can also highlight maybe this one down there to the right, just next to the Xbox icon. This is about a game that WFP did in Cambodia. It's about nutrition education. There was a campaign organized on teaching kids in schools how to avoid unhealthy foods, because there is a habit to buy unhealthy snacks just across the street from the school, and what type of foods one can consume that actually are more healthy for you. And this was like a gamified campaign, which was very successful, done together with teachers, with the Ministry of Education in several schools. There are some qualitative evidence about its, I would say, I wouldn't call it really impact. I'm myself an M&E, also professional, monitoring evaluation, so I use this very cautiously. But there was definitely positive effect of this game on people's perception and motivation and just the awareness about healthy eating. And so this has been expanded in collaboration with UNICEF to other schools around the country. So there are these really nice opportunities. And WFP also is doing in 2 other countries, at least, also nutrition education via either a gamified app or via an AR experience. So in Bhutan, for example, there was a pilot project that needs further money to actually go to scale and be really implemented throughout the country. But it was about having a scavenger hunt using a Pokemon Go style design to go around the school and the environment to actually find healthy foods, identify them, learn about them as a team using one tablet for 3 or 4 school children in an augmented reality setting. So this was a very interesting project. Maybe to close this one off, the most recent collaboration between WFP and the gaming industry is with Games for Change. That's why we're here. And it's about the student challenge. Last year, as part of the last year's edition of the Student Challenge, WFP was a theme sponsor, providing the Outplay Hunger theme. But the topics that were discussed or that we invited students to design their game around were food waste and nutrition. And I myself believe that actually game design is a much more effective way of really teaching and learning on a subject than merely, so to say, gameplay. Gameplay, there is a certain level of immersion and learning that you can acquire. But then when you have to create something together in collaboration with others who bring different skills and walk through the problem and think about it and learn about it with background materials, with teacher resources, student resources, you have a different level of immersion. And then when you apply it to the, when you apply the STEM skills on that, the game design skills, then of course you have a much deeper level of learning, not only about how to make games, but what this topic is all about and the mechanics of the topic in the game setting. So yeah, WFP was very happy about this collaboration. Actually, the 2 games of the year that won the Student Challenge were both about Outplay Hunger theme. So one of them is the Scarcity Line by a group of students from China and from actually California. And the other one was from a high school student in Egypt with the game Harvest. So I would highly recommend that you Google those games, the Scarcity Line and Harvest. They're really fun to play. They really show, how much passion went into this and care and thinking. And they're just good games that shows also the potential for those students to pursue gaming as a career. And personally, if you'd ask me, I would love to have them as an intern also at the UN to help us also further advance the gaming initiative. So let's see. Maybe once I'm back from paternity leave, this will happen. And so next step, another year, another project. So WFP will continue with another theme, Outgrow Hunger this time. It's about showing the link between the natural environment and food security and why it's important to have this link carefully thought through. So how to think about a sustainable food future, how to think about nature actually nourishing people, and how can the food system also be a positive for environment, not just a negative, because it's of course very exploitative, right? Producing food can really have very bad effects on planet Earth. So yeah, we want to promote that as well. Just a quick maybe highlight of other initiatives. So there are 2 other organizations in Rome where WFP is based. These are called the Food and Agriculture Organization and the International Fund for Agricultural Development. They all do different things. They approach the food security and hunger agenda in different ways. So IFAD is basically an international financial institution that is, akin to the World Bank. And so they provide loans to governments for large-scale agriculture projects, but they also have, educational and youth engagement work underway. And one of them has included gaming. So they have developed a game called Farmed in collaboration with communities in Sudan before the war broke out. After the war broke out, well, then the game also could not really proceed over there. But it's actually a tabletop game which is teaching about farming techniques and adapting to a changing climate with different, hazard scenarios. And I was told through qualitative, again, evidence that the communities were very engaged on this. It was something new, a new and fresh way of talking about hazards and farming in a hazard-based context, of drought, of flood, of climate change, and learning about the links between those and how you can actually do farming more sustainably or in a way that is prepared for the future. So there is some interesting qualitative evidence coming out of that. And now the latest one from Rome, FAO has developed a game which is AgroAdapt. That game is not for farming communities, but it's really more for practitioners, for people from ministries, for people who work with farmers. It's it's like quasi-digital experience. It's both offline and online, where you also learn how to adapt to a changing climate with different quizzes, etc., different storytelling. So I would invite you to also check this out if you're interested. And then beyond games, one can also use the medium or the technology behind the medium to also tell stories about the issue of hunger, the root causes of hunger, and food insecurity, the impact that can have on other areas of life, right? So if you are malnourished, obviously this will have an impact on your health, right? And by malnourished, I don't mean just undernourished because you don't have enough food, but also because the type of food that you're consuming, you may not have the right nutrients to actually develop and live an active and healthy life. That's part of the food security definition. It's not just enough food, but actually quality food that allows you to live an active and healthy life, develop your cognition, etc. So I would just like to play this quick video just to show, how a game design tool, how an engine can also help tell a story that is not necessarily, a game, but just a story. A little bit of advertising. Unfortunately, they're not bringing money to the Game City, but maybe next year. But this was part of the Unreal Fellowship in Serbia. Wow, powerful, huh? So Maria Tosic, she is actually the curator of the educational program at the Serbian public broadcaster RTS, and she was part of the Unreal Fellowship in Novi Sad at the Trilateral Studio for about 3 months. She had no prior experience or connection to game engines, and in those 3 months, she developed this with mentorship of the professionals. And this is actually my last slide. So just to give you a few different ways how, the game industry can help with the zero hunger cause or the wider humanitarian objectives, resourcing, both in terms of fundraising and providing technical support, is a possibility. Storytelling, like through this video, either through a non-game experience, right, like this video, or actually a story in the game. Education, nutrition education, education about agriculture, about climate resilience, to go deeper than just raising awareness and telling a story, but really helping understand the mechanics of a problem through game design and gameplay. So the game design piece is the student challenge, which fits nicely here. Training, so there's the possibility to actually learn to teach humanitarian and UN staff stuff that they need for their work in a much more interactive, immersive, better, and effective way than just the usual workshop, PowerPoint, plenary, or even e-learning, I would say. And there's a possibility to upskill people from vulnerable backgrounds who are marginalized in skills that are used in game design, and that they can take with them and have a job or find a job not just in a gaming industry but also outside of that. All tech related stuff, ed tech, climate tech, health tech, clean tech, I don't know, you name it. And also in the creative industry, movie production, music production. So there's just so much, the multiplier effect is just so huge. That's also an area that is being explored by several UN agencies right now. How can gaming be part of the solution in terms of upskilling and bringing people away from dependency and unconditional assistance to upskilling and to self-reliance and to dignity, really. And here's the final piece, food for thought for you. Research, I mentioned in the few examples here, qualitative evidence, right? Qualitative here, qualitative there. We don't have, or the UN agencies don't have really the bandwidth, the capacity to do this research to actually prove, okay, this is where we create impact. This is how impactful games are. It's one thing to say we raised so much money and was spent for so many goods and so many lives were affected. It's a whole other thing to talk about behavioral science, behavioral change, etc. So I would like to invite you to enter this space with the UN. For example, as part of the UN, write it down, UN 2.0 initiative. They have a behavioral science track that actually wants to explore technologies that can help the UN leverage this field better. And I think gaming could be a perfect ally in this effort. And on that note, I yield my floor. Thank you.